Since it came out, the iPad Air quickly became my iPad of choice, and it's the one I mostly recommend to others out there. The redesign combined with a host of features from the Pro models just made it a really appealing iPad to use and recommend. And while I still own the iPad Pro from 2018, which is still a better iPad in many ways, I've always found myself just coming back to the iPad Air. Maybe that cool blue colorway and Touch ID had something to do with that. But I've been using the new M1 iPad Pro 12.9 inch with the crazy new display, M1 chip power and the larger overall size for a few weeks, so I think I've got some perspective to show you what it's like compared to the iPad Air that I've been using so diligently. So if you do like iPad and aesthetic tech content, be sure to subscribe and let's dive right into it. Let's talk about the screen first, because overall this is the biggest update and the main thing you're going to notice over the iPad Air on this new 12.9 inch Pro model. To put it simply, the new Liquid Retina XDR display on this bigger model is utterly stunning. Everything just jumps off the screen with punchy colours and those deep inky blacks we all love so much. Returning to the ProMotion 120Hz refresh rate over the 60Hz of the Air was a huge reminder of how much better these screens are too, and I really did miss the smoothness. Apple has used mini LED technology here to really push the screen on this thing to the next level. We could talk specifics here for ages and ages, but what you need to know is it's super bright at 1000 nits, and at a peak brightness of 1600 nits, it shows off HDR content incredibly well. For me, the biggest boon though is the outdoor viewing, which is totally possible with this enhanced level of brightness. It's been a joy to take with me on photo and video shoots that are based outside when I need to have a look at the footage. I've talked about this many times before, but photo editing in Lightroom has been one of my go-to and favourite apps for the iPad for a long time. It makes up the bulk of my iPad use, and I do it pretty much every single day. And editing photos on this new display elevates an already excellent experience. Having those deeper blacks and more accurate colours really helps my photo editing workflow and allows me to pour more intricate colours out than ever before. I've even done some colour grading in Premiere Pro using this as a second screen to get those colours in my videos looking extra beautiful, which again is a wonderful benefit of having such a high quality display. So the screen is wonderful, but it's not without some minor drawbacks. If you've looked online at this iPad, you've probably heard of the display showing significant blooming. This is when white elements on a dark screen, like subtitles in a film or writing notes on a black page, shows a small haze around itself. It's easy to notice if you're looking out for it, but I wouldn't say it ruins the experience. Overall, when you compare this screen to the iPad Air screen, it's understandably a knockout win for the larger iPad Pro. I really like this display a lot, and I know that now I've been exposed to it, it'll be hard to go back to anything else. Jumping back to the design of this iPad, there's little change from the last few years of iPad Pro models. What I can talk about though is the difference in size. I've only ever used the 11-inch iPad models before, and I've always liked that size. However, when I did go into an Apple store or saw someone with the larger 12.9-inch model, I always thought it looked a little huge and unwieldy, but after spending a few weeks with it, I really came round to it. A bigger screen just gives you more canvas size for any endeavour you're going to undertake. Even something as simple as writing notes is better on here, purely because there's more room to do it. Another improvement is in that USB-C port too. It's now a Thunderbolt 3 and USB 4 enabled, so transfer speeds are wild fast, and if you are the proud owner of an Apple Pro Display XDR, it supports the full 6K resolution, which is mad. Camera wise on the back, you are getting a wide and an ultra wide angle if you do fancy taking some photos with your iPad, but more importantly they're coupled with a LiDAR scanner, which is really great for that AR content. I'm not one to really use the iPad for any camera work, but if you're scanning documents or if you're in a pinch, it's nice to have them there. The more interesting camera change this year comes from the front facing camera. The iPad Pro now comes equipped with a super wide angle camera on the front, which not only allows you to fit way more in the frame, but it's also got a super cool trick up its sleeve. Center Stage. Center Stage is a camera tracking feature which allows the iPad to use that wide-angle lens to track you while you're on a video call. So if you're presenting or moving around or just grabbing something to show someone, you won't have to move your iPad to stay in frame. It's really cool how well it works, and I think in our current video calling climate, a lot of people are going to really appreciate it. It's a huge step up over the iPad Air. Before we move on, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Surshark. Surshark is a private virtual network that turns you into an anonymous and hard to track online user and makes the internet a safer place to visit. Just open the app, hit the connect button, and you're golden. You're now hidden from your internet service provider, meaning they can't track your data, so you'll have a secure and private connection to the internet wherever you are. As we slowly enter back into society, you may be logging onto more public Wi-Fi spots than you have done in a long time. These connections are notoriously unsafe to use when dealing with sensitive data, so ensuring you have a safe connection is well worth your time. One subscription to Surshark also works across an unlimited amount of devices at the same time too. If you are lucky enough to be traveling, you can get around geo-blocked websites just by changing your location within the app. This also opens up 15 of the biggest Netflix libraries, so you can continue to watch your favourite show regardless of where you are. So for me, that's always going to be the beautiful Studio Ghibli films. So if you fancy giving Surshark a go, then click the link in the description below and use the promo code BYTEREVIEW to not only get a huge 83% off the regular price, but also 3 months of service totally for free. Surshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee too, so you can give it a go before committing to anything. And thanks again to the folks over at Surshark for sponsoring this video. Okay, to set the scene when we're talking about performance, it's important to understand the iPad Pro I'm using has got 16 gigabytes of RAM. So this is the iPad in its most powerful state, and I really hate to repeat myself, but I will. Since the 2018 iPad Pro, iPads have just got processor headroom for years and years. I haven't once felt any form of slurp or hints that I'm getting to the limit of its power with any of the iPads recently, and that's just exacerbated with these new M1 models. It's got power to spare. I did keep a real eye on performance though while using this model compared to the Air and even my older 2018 iPad Pro, and honestly it's really hard to spot a clear difference. It certainly seems to open apps quicker and switch between them faster, but not in a way that would make you turn your head. The big difference here is I've noticed how many apps it can keep in its memory. I haven't had to close any apps on this iPad since I got it, and when I switch back to the apps that were open, even really big ones like LumaFusion and Lightroom, they open right back up where I left them off without blinking, which is really nice. In terms of a raw power test though, I made 2 of the same 10-minute 4K timelines within LumaFusion and rendered them out with some color grading on top. And as you can see, the M1 iPad Pro did in fact pull ahead, rendering the timeline in 5 minutes and 2 seconds, while the iPad Air took an additional 40 seconds to do the same. So while it may not be clear in day-to-day tasks, there is a significant boost in power when it comes to outright processing. A lot of us out there were expecting iPadOS 15 to be a heavy hitter when it came to the future of software for the iPad. I actually waited for WWDC this year before even reviewing this product because I, like many others out there, thought it might fundamentally change the iPad. But despite some great looking updates, iPadOS 15 wasn't what a lot of us thought it might be. No pro user apps like Final Cut or Logic, no Mac apps running on iPad, and the biggest miss of all for me at least was no mention of natively supporting external displays with the right resolution scaling. Initially I was really sad about this. Why pour all of the M1 8GB or 16GB of RAM and a Thunderbolt enabled USB-C port into a product like this and then hinder it with iPadOS? And I think that topic alone could be an entirely separate video in itself, but the more I thought about it, the more I can see why they did it. An iPad is a different computing solution from a Mac. It's not supposed to replace it, and a lot of people like me who want all that stuff and make videos about technology on the internet aren't what you'd call average consumers. People buy an iPad for an iPad experience, an approachable touch-based computing device, and putting Mac OS on there, and even really complicated apps, just goes against that. Also, from a logistical standpoint, having more products with the same M1 chip may well just be an easier thing for Apple to do, rather rather than making a bunch of different chips. This is all conjecture of course, but I don't think Apple wants you to pick between a MacBook and an iPad. They both serve different purposes with some crossover in the middle. You might be able to get away with one or the other, but they're both fundamentally different products. That hasn't obviously stopped me from wanting all those things though. I'd personally love an iPad that can really do it all, but I don't think that's the aim here, at least not yet. Finally, battery life on this larger iPad is really comparable to the earlier iPad Pro and Air models. With standard use, you'll get through a day no problem at all. Mostly for me, I end up on around 30% before the day is out, but if you are doing more demanding things on this iPad, like playing high brightness HDR content, or editing complex 4K edits, or just loads and loads of photo editing, you might need to plug in towards the end of the day. But aside from that, battery life remains a huge plus of the iPad, and that hasn't changed at all here. Overall, Apple has made another incredible iPad here with the M1 12.9 inch. A beautiful screen combined with the raw power of the M1 chip means it's going to be a relevant device for years and years, and I'm a big fan of it. If you're on an older iPad Pro or Air models before the 2018 redesign, then I would say upgrading to one of these is definitely worth it. What you're getting from this iPad is going to be a huge update, not only in terms of performance, but also screen technology. However, if you got a Pro model from 2018 onwards or the iPad Air from 2020, then the only thing you're going to really see is the difference in the screen, and that's only on the 12.9 inch model. If you're a more demanding user and you can see the benefit within it, like a photographer on the move or a filmmaker that needs to do things quickly or an artist, then I'm sure this is going to be worth it alone. But for everyone else, I think you're golden with the iPad Air 4 or the 2018 and onward iPad Pro models. What I will say is the 16GB of RAM on here makes it feel like overkill, and unless you really need the extra storage space, I personally wouldn't say that's worth it either. Anyway, that rounds up my thoughts on this new iPad Pro. If you pick one up, then let me know in the comments below what you think of it, and also tell me your thoughts on iPadOS 15. I always like to hear what you're thinking. And obviously, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe, it helps me out a lot. Hit the like button on the way out too, that would be massive, and I will see you all in the next one.